Thank you very much. Thank you very much for having me present today. I'm very happy to be here, and I want to share with you the story of our innovation program at Sheba Medical Center, and of course, specifically talking about digital health, and even more specifically, a reference to artificial intelligence and what we're doing. And I'll start with saying a few words about myself and about Sheba Medical Center. So I'm the Chief Medical Officer and the Chief Innovation Officer at Sheba Medical Center. I have these two hats that typically don't always go together, but there's a lot of possibilities to actually be able to implement in the real world, the real medical world, the innovation that is coming out from our innovation program. And for those of you less familiar, Sheba Medical Center is the largest hospital in Israel, and a very large hospital by any standards, with about 2,000 beds. And we have on one campus an acute care hospital, a rehabilitation hospital, a cancer hospital, a children's hospital, and a women's hospital. We're with a very large academic campus, a research facilities, innovation center, a simulation center, and so on. Very strong footprint in the country of Israel, both from clinical perspectives, but also research and, of course, innovation. And it is important to note that Sheba is very digital and has been very digital for many, many years, being completely paperless since 2004, with the last of our systems transitioning from paper to electronic back at that time. And of course, we have a lot of data that has been stored on site for many years going back. And of course, I'll talk about that in this presentation. Another thing to note is that Sheba has a very strong and successful commercialization program. So we typically launch startup companies from the medical center, about 5 to 7 a year on average. And many of these startup companies get sold on the market or provide us with return revenues. And much of that funding goes back to support our innovation and research programs at Sheba. So that success in commercialization is really the ongoing capability to continue on a very large scale to do what I'm about to share with you in the next few minutes. Sheba was also ranked as a top 10 hospital by the Newsweek ranking for the past 3 years in a row since Newsweek started the global ranking of hospitals. And of course, we're very proud of that achievement. One of the things that Sheba is also leading in the world is the concept of what we call the future of health, or setting the vision of healthcare in the future, and specifically what we call Healthcare 2030. And Sheba has launched this initiative back in 2018, calling really the leaders of healthcare around the world to come together for conversations and discussions on how will healthcare need to look like 10 years from now to really try to answer for the biggest challenges that healthcare has. And we're all familiar with these challenges. We got together physically in 2018 on site here at Sheba with about 30 of healthcare leaders from around the world. Two days of roundtable discussions. We then met again in Montreal a year later, still physically, to continue discussions. And then we met virtually, of course, in 2020, like everything has become virtual, to continue discussions. Later on this year, the 4th summit will take place, hopefully in person in Dubai. That is the plan currently, to continue discussions. And FOH is really setting the vision of the future of healthcare. For those of you who are more interested in that vision, it was just published about 2 months ago in the New England Journal of Medicine Catalyst under the title Healthcare 2030. So I urge you to read and see that vision. But obviously, to get that vision to become a reality, there is need of huge amount of innovation. And the innovation that will enable the transformation is really around digital health, whether it's telemedicine, that obviously has become very, very important, really in the last year through COVID, but before that as well. Artificial intelligence, which of course will play a critical role in the redesigned healthcare system, virtual reality and augmented reality, and robotics. Of course, all of these will be critical in moving to where we want to be by the year 2030 and answering for some of our greatest challenges. So if we have a vision, how do we move from vision to reality? We need to, first of all, structure innovation processes, because innovation in many times is unstructured. It's this secret spice that we either have or we don't to be a successful innovation institute. So we need to structure innovation processes. We need to build an innovation and implementation ecosystem, because implementation, as you all know, is not less important. We need to coordinate efforts, because if we all work together, but we each have a different vision and we each work towards a different vision, we will not get there. We will each be going in a different direction. And we need to build evidence, because in healthcare, everything is about evidence. It's not just about having the innovation approach, but what kind of evidence can you build around outcomes specifically? And finally, we need to continuously revisit the vision, because always things are changing, like, for example, COVID that came along and really had a huge impact on how we see the future of health. So for that, we've built ARC. ARC is the execution arm in many ways of the future of health community. Or, how do we make that vision become reality? ARC stands for Accelerate, Redesign, and Collaborate. Accelerate innovation to redesign healthcare by collaborating with partners. And it was really clear to us from the start that we need to build an ecosystem of players that share the same vision, that works in coordinated fashion to create this new concept of health as we see it in the future. Now, ARC really is based on 4 fundamental principles. The first one is a focus on digital health. Digital health is the main transformation vehicle for the next decade. We're about to undergo this huge transformation, very much like the banking industry has gone through in the past 20 years. We are up next in terms of where healthcare is going. We are about to undergo this transformation. And of course, digital health, more than pharma and more than the medical devices, will be leading this transformation. The second is open innovation, working together with the industry, private and public, strategic industry partners, corporate companies with startup companies. We need to all come together. We need to find the right approach to do this if we're going to make a big difference. The third is international collaborations, looking for the best partners internationally, wherever they are. If they are the right partner, if they share the same vision, then we need to work together, regardless of geography. And finally, innovation infrastructure, because to have a strong innovation program requires infrastructure, and I'll talk a few words about that later on. When we talk about digital health specifically at ARC, we're focusing on these 6 areas. We call them the ARC hubs. These hubs, each one has a director, each one has a team, each one has a budget, annual milestones, and so on, to make sure the operations actually happen along this strategic area, whether it's big data and artificial intelligence, or virtualization in medicine, virtual reality, augmented reality, 3D printing, and so on, the operating room of the future and how digital health will impact the operating room, telemedicine, of course, rehabilitation, again, how will digital health impact rehabilitation, and precision medicine, the multi-omics universe that we all now understand has a critical role to play in healthcare of the future. When we talk about open innovation, we really are making a huge effort to try and turn Sheba into what we call a startup-friendly environment, to be able to bring startups into ARC, provide them access to the entire ARC network, which you'll see in a second who that is, provide them guidance to where the needs of the market are, and allow them to accelerate development. And we have now more than 70 startup companies that are ARC members that work within this ecosystem. This huge number of startup companies, you see some of them here, this is not the full picture, of course, really are seeing acceleration of development, many of them in the artificial intelligence field, some of them coming from within Sheba, if it's internal innovation, the upper part of the slide, some coming from outside, external innovation. Some are startup companies we are investing money in. I'll talk a few words about our investment fund. And some are companies in our accelerator. All of them are ARC members. And again, this is a list that continues to grow all the time. Apart from the startup companies, I mentioned international collaborations, and we work with some of the leading institutions in the world. Most of them, as you can see on this slide, are from North America, whether it's Mayo Clinic or Mass General or Mount Sinai or Cedars-Sinai, and others, as you see here on the slide. And there's tremendous amount of work that happens together with our partners around the world, working hand in hand to coordinate efforts to run pilots together in telemedicine, for example, in artificial intelligence, for example, sharing data between us, sharing startup companies that we feel have great potential, and so on. So the level of collaboration that happens with our partners is really on a very large scale. But it's not just the other hospitals and academic medical centers we work with, it's also strategic industry partners. And again, you see the names here on this slide. I won't read through them, but these are large companies. They play a major role in healthcare today, and they're working with us within ARC as ARC members, and some of them providing funding as innovation grants to develop new solutions that both they need as well as we need as providers. And there's a huge amount of activities that happens with strategic partners as well. I mentioned infrastructure. When we talk about infrastructure, it's really split into four. First of all, it's the physical space. How do you build the right physical space for innovation to thrive? It's a lot of work that we've been doing in the past 5-6 years. This is the ARC Center at Sheba. You can see it here. It's not just physical space. It's also the data infrastructure. It's one thing to have a lot of data, but how do you make sure you can actually leverage the data, for example, for artificial intelligence development and so on, precision medicine, innovation, and so on. So you need the right data infrastructure, which includes working in the cloud, which includes being able to access the data very easily, which includes being able to work under the regulations of data privacy and so on. And it has been a major investment, and we have a very strong plan for that infrastructure that we share with our partners around the world. It's also policy and regulation infrastructure, which affects how quickly we can move, which affect how innovative we can be, how can we work with outside partners, and it's something we're always engaged in improving all the time, internal policies, but also impacting external regulation from the government, for example. And lastly, it's the funding infrastructure. How do we have the right funding to bring an idea to a proof of concept to a product to the market? That requires funding, and there is a whole funding infrastructure at ARC that allows us to do that. A few words about big data and analytics. Some of the work we're doing within ARC, there are a couple of focus points. One of them is, of course, I mentioned the multi-omics. How do we use AI, machine learning, deep learning to really make sense of not just genomics, which is one thing, but blending genomics together with radiology data, with digital pathology, with microbiomic data, with proteomic data, with patient-reported outcomes data. All of that is something that AI will need to play a critical role, and this is some of the work we're doing. We're also doing work on improving effectiveness and improving efficiency through something we call a control tower. I'll say another word about it in a second, but also AI in the operating room, for example. You know, at some point, linking that with robotics is where we need to go, and that's another focus point for ARC. And also using AI to improve customer experience. For example, when you will be coming in the future into the emergency department, you will be talking with an AI nurse, as you see here in this bottom photo, and the AI nurse will send you to do the tests that are required based on your primary complaint and your comorbid conditions and so on. So this is another thing we're working on to develop, and we think that, again, within the next 10 years, these products will have a revolutionary impact on healthcare. When we talk about mobile health and the telehealth revolution, one thing that we're doing a huge work around is mobile health technology that allows us to examine the patient from afar, like TytoCare, for example, or other solutions out there that allows us to examine patients hundreds and thousands of miles away from us. Technology that allows us to perform laboratory tests on patients at home, far away from the laboratory, allows us to do imaging, like ultrasound, for patients far away. Link that together with sensor technology, wearable sensor technology, which can come in any way and form and will deliver huge amount of information continuously from patients in their natural habitat, as you might say. Take all that together, that would require another element, which is the AI-based analytics, because we will not be able to make sense of all this data that will be coming in without the right analytic tools. And this is another focus of ours through a couple of programs we're running for both chronic disease as well as acute disease conditions through our telemedicine hub and AI hub working together. I mentioned the control tower, and this is another big effort at Sheba and ARC. We're in the process of putting together a control tower for the hospital that will be AI empowered, allowing this to run with only one or two FTEs that would be running the control tower 24/7 to optimize clinical processes, to optimize patient flow, to optimize logistics. We're working with a few companies, you see the names up here, to provide this comprehensive approach. It's a work in progress. It's something that we think has the potential to have a huge impact on hospitals of the future, smart hospitals as they are called, and we're working with some of our partners around the world in putting this together. We have what we call the ARC AI Village, which is really about, first of all, working together to identify needs, working together on development, local validation as well as external validation, and creating the evidence on value. How can we impact value for patients at the end of the day? And the AI Village is composed of these companies and these partners that you see here, but the list, of course, is growing, and more partners are coming on board to be a part of this village and do these developments together and validations together. The way we work with data at ARC is we have a platform called MD Clone that allows us to provide access through the platform. It's an R&D data lake that we run in parallel to the operational data lake and allows all of our partners to work on this data lake for research and development purposes. MD Clone allows us to do this without any risk to patient privacy and allows us to share data between the ARC members. And that is something critical. We're already doing this with some of our partners in the US and Canada, and the idea is to expand to include more partners that will be working on the platform. And this is our global network with MD Clone. You see some of the partners already on the system, like Intermountain, like Ottawa Hospital in Canada, like Jefferson, learning and improving data exchange and linking processes to outcomes. What are the best processes that would provide the best outcomes is something we're learning within this global network through this platform called MD Clone. We're extending the reach of ARC. Some of our partners are implementing ARC methodologies and ARC structure, like Ottawa Hospital, which is working very, very closely with us. Again, many of the structures at ARC at Sheba are now implemented at Ottawa, including the data. And an even bigger project is a project we're launching. We just recently launched in Chicago, which is building an ARC Innovation Center and ARC Accelerator for startup companies in the city of Chicago. Again, a very strong footprint locally, working a lot with data with some of the local players, the major academic medical centers in Chicago. So this is the full ARC network, as I've described, from the international collaborations to the corporate strategic partners, to the startups, of course, and it's not a full list even, and the academia. And it's not just about Sheba Medical Center alone, trying to make a difference in the world, but it's really about this ecosystem of more than 100 partners that work in synchrony to try and impact healthcare, to try to make sure the vision of Healthcare 2030 actually becomes a reality at the end of the day. If we don't coordinate efforts and work together, it will not happen. And that's why ARC is so important to making that work. So I'll stop here. There's my contact information if people want to be in touch. And of course, we'll be happy to extend offers for collaboration with any partner around the world. Thank you very much.